Oh, hello. Welcome to another episode of Raph's Retro Comic Books. What is special about this comic book? Is it the character, the creator, the artists, the story? Actually, the most interesting thing about this comic book might be the paper that it's printed on. Stay tuned. Welcome to another episode of Raph's Retro Comic Books, a YouTube channel dedicated to comic books, enjoying comic books, finding more about comic books. In this episode, I want to talk about this StarLord Special Edition and why it's such an interesting and trend-setting comic book that came out in the early 80s. Now, at that point, StarLord was not even what I would consider to be a B-level character. So why did he get such special treatment in this special edition? And I think the answer could be that the stories that it reprinted were done by Chris Claremont and John Byrne, who had become incredibly popular as the creators behind X-Men at that time, which was one of Marvel's most popular titles. So I think what Marvel wanted to experiment with was looking at their previous work and bringing it forward into kind of like a deluxe edition issue. And StarLord was chosen, which was kind of interesting because, at that point he really only appeared in a black and white magazine called Marvel Preview. What they decided to do was publish this special edition with a much higher cover price, but put it in a nicer quality paper and colorize it, because StarLord's original story was printed in black and white in a magazine. And I'm guessing it did well enough that it started a trend from publishers to start printing in higher gloss, higher quality paper where colors would pop. You would really see like the nice pencil details, and just the entire print package was much better. And shortly after this, Marvel took it up to another level with a monthly feature, or maybe it was a bi-monthly feature, called Marvel Fanfare. And what they did with Marvel Fanfare was this was kind of more of like an anthology series where there would be short stories featuring popular characters. And the first few were I would say like really good, and they featured like really popular like characters at that time, like X-Men, Spider-Man, Daredevil, and whatnot. And Marvel Fanfare for the first couple years ended up being very successful. And I remember actually, as a younger collector, the first few issues of Marvel Fanfare were actually quite pricey. But now you can find these like really cheap. And this led to other kind of experiments by Marvel and by DC and other publishers in trying to produce kind of like higher quality, more expensive content. More money to squeeze out of the collectors. What this also allowed them to do was, because of the direct market, they decided to kind of publish more mature titles. One notorious one being Void Indigo, written by Steve Gerber, that only lasted 2 issues because of its what people felt was too violent, too unadult theme. But if you were to take a look at this now, it would seem rather tame compared to the other comic books that come out like these days. But at that time, Void Indigo really created a lot of controversy in the comic book hobby. It was not until kind of in 85, 86, or 1986 specifically, when DC would jump in and create a huge hit, and that would be this. Batman the Dark Knight Returns. Frank Miller, who used to work at Marvel and was really well known for his run on Daredevil, as well as other issues here and there, jumped to DC. He did a 6-issue series called Ronin that was critically received well, but perhaps by the fans not as well. just because it was maybe a bit too much of a departure from like standard comic books. A lot of people go back to that series and say, wow, it was an amazing series, but I think at that time it was just a little difficult for regular comic book fans who are used to kind of like Daredevil to really get into that story. But he totally hit it out of the park with this, and it still holds up extremely well, and it was a real big trendsetter. The one thing about these, what we call these square-bound prestige format books as well, was that it allowed creators to kind of go beyond the Comics Code Authority to produce content that was more mature, that wouldn't be heavily scrutinized by the Comics Code Authority, and it was extremely well received. And the cover price on these were very expensive. I think a lot of publishers tried, or Marvel and DC in general, tried to kind of push out more of these high-end products. And while they did fine, not all of them did that great. There have been like a lot of these amazing, what we call these prestige square-bound, like limited series. They typically lasted like 4 issues. Some of them were just single one-shot issues. But I think as time went on, the popularity of these by fans became less and less. And part of it was because of the expense, because the cover price on these square-bound books were usually, 3, 4, 5 times the cover price of a regular comic book. And a comic book collector only has so much money they can spend. So it kind of died out. But there's still like a great example of what I would call higher quality comic books for that period of time. And you can find a lot of this stuff, especially from the 80s, for really cheap in the cheapie bins, in the dollar bins, the $2 bins, everywhere. So what I do now is, let's take a look at some more examples. Let's see what's in the box. I picked out a few square-bound prestige format books that I wanted to talk about. I'm not going to open these up and go through page by page, but I'll kind of give a high-level overview of this series and what I remember and what I enjoyed about it. So shortly after Dark Knight, DC published a 3-issue miniseries called Green Arrow, The Longbow Hunters, and this really reinvented Green Arrow to a kind of a modern times anyways, but they had beautiful painted covers, amazing artwork by Mike Grell. And if you've read any of Mike Grell's stuff, you'll find that he has a very high-paced, quick-read kind of style. And this 3-issue series is probably some of his best work. And it led into kind of Green Arrow getting his own series. Highly recommend it. You can find this in the trade paperback, but you can also find individual issues now for pretty cheap, like sometimes even less than cover price. So another series, Nick Fury versus S.H.I.E.L.D. This is one of Marvel's earlier prestige format series, and I'm showing the second issue. I don't have the first issue anymore. I couldn't find it, but the first issue has an incredible painted cover by Jim Steranko. And the second issue, I think, has an outstanding cover by Bill Sienkiewicz, and I hope I'm pronouncing that last name properly. But 6 issues, and it was quite popular when it came out. And again, like, you can find these relatively inexpensively, and but recommended as well. I remember when I read this changed my outlook on Lex Luthor a lot. This is just a single issue featuring kind of like the origin of Lex Luthor. And this, if you don't know much about Lex Luthor, again, this kind of brings him up to date, but it gives a really kind of dark history or origin of this character, worthy of being like the arch nemesis of Superman. I cannot recommend this highly enough. The unauthorized biography by I don't even know who these gentlemen are. Wendell Barreto with Adam Kubert. But man, such a good story, and not hard to find at all. This is kind of like one I think that maybe kind of flew under the radar, and there are other kind of Punisher prestige format series. One in particular by Jim Starlin and Bernie Wrightson called Punisher POV. That's a lot of fun. But I actually found this one-shot issue, quite entertaining as well too, because there's a good mix of characters, USA Agent as well as Paladin, and it has just a nice simple Punisher story arc, and I just can't explain. Like, I don't know, probably more nostalgia than anything else, but I really did enjoy this one issue shot. And it's got a great painted cover by Jusco. Now, this is the Excalibur one shot, and this is, I think, really their kind of first appearance as a team, and written by Chris Claremont, artwork Davis and Neary, Alan Davis, I believe, and this kind of led into like them having their own series with the same creative team that would last a lot of issues, and this one single story is also very good. But I just kind of remember when this came out, it was a big deal, and again, you can usually find this for really cheap, but it's everything about this is good, and it still holds up like quite well. Next is Cosmic Odyssey, written by Jim Starlin, with pencils by Mike Mignola, and one of my favorite 4-issue kind of like story arcs. Like Jim Starlin, I think at his best in terms of what he kind of does. Here you have a team of superheroes brought together to fight this one kind of universal threat that also brings Darkseid into the equation as well too. And I believe this is Mignola before he started doing Hellboy, but at some point he really kind of developed a unique style of artwork, and this is an amazing series. And again, not that hard to find. You could probably find the trade maybe easier than the 4 issues, but a wonderful series, and I think really fitting in this kind of format. I remember when this used to be kind of like the bane in the cheapy bins. You would always find this series for nothing, and it's too bad because it kind of brought it really brought Blackhawk kind of to the forefront, and it has amazing artwork by Howard Chaykin, but I just felt like the story was a bit overwrought. Like, it just had a lot of maybe too much stuff going on to really kind of, it's just not an easy read. If you're a Blackhawk fan like I am, this is definitely worth investigating if you haven't already. A lot of people, like, if you like Blackhawk, every Blackhawk fan probably has this series. 3 issues, and again, you can find this for like nothing. And the last one I want to mention came a little later. To me, like, the Golden Age is probably the peak of the Elseworlds label under DC. Now, Elseworlds is kind of like the what if of DC, if you're not familiar. So the stories that have this label are not part of DC canon, but they're just kind of like a fiction, like, what if situation. And this is probably, it's up there in terms of one of my favorite story arcs. Like, if you notice in the background of my videos, I have a poster of Kingdom Come, which is it's kind of tough for me to choose which one I like the better. Certainly, the artwork by Alex Ross in Kingdom Come puts it at a very high level, but I just kind of love the story of the Golden Age, and this takes place shortly after World War II, and it features a lot of DC's Golden Age superheroes. So I want to say this is like a must read from that time. Like I believe this came out in the like 93 or 92. And really it was a wonderful series that lasted 4 issues. So there you go. Like these prestige format square-bound books, they are extremely high quality print. They're not that hard to find, and often you can find them for less than the cover price of back then. You could usually find them in the cheapie bins, if you're lucky. Especially this guy, the Lex Luthor guy. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Raph's Retro Comic Books, where I talked about these square-bound prestige format books. I hope you found it informative, and I hope it encourages you to kind of look for these books in comic book stores, comic book conventions, used bookstores everywhere. All right? Thank you for watching, and see you next time.